The sheriff's cruiser was already blocking the gravel road when the auctioneer's gavel came down. I stood ankle-deep in red dust, phone pressed in my ear, listening to a stranger sell land that had been in my family for 4 generations. 3,500 acres. My acres. The cattle scattered at the fence line, like they sensed the wrongness of it. Sold. The auctioneer said, voice cheerful, final. That word landed harder than a gunshot. 2 weeks earlier, my life had been quiet, predictable. Sunrise checks on the south pasture, coffee in the truck, paperwork at the kitchen table, while the radio murmured about nothing that mattered. The HOA beyond my eastern boundary had always been an irritation, nothing more. Trimmed hedges, identical mailboxes, passive-aggressive letters about view sheds. I ignored them. I owned farmland. They owned rules. Then the letters changed. First, a boundary compliance notice. Then a shared access claim. I called, left messages. No one called back. I assumed it was incompetence, not malice. That assumption cost me everything. The buyer shook hand with the HOA president. Linda Carver, Pearl's beige blazer, smile sharp as wire. She didn't look at me. Not once. I stepped forward. This sale is invalid. I said, steady. That land isn't theirs to sell. Linda finally turned. According to our records, she said, it is. The sheriff shifted uncomfortably. He wouldn't meet my eyes either. By sunset, the gates were padlocked. My cattle were trapped on the wrong side. My deed, somehow, had been superseded by an HOA lien I'd never agreed to, filed under development plan I'd never seen. That night, I sat alone in the farmhouse, lights off, documents spread across the table like a crime scene. Every page smelled wrong. Fresh ink, backdated signatures. Legal language just clean enough to pass if no one looked too closely. They hadn't just taken my land. They'd assumed I wouldn't fight. Outside, headlights swept the driveway. A black SUV slowed, then rolled on, watching, measuring. That was the moment I understood this wasn't clerical error. It was an intrusion, planned, coordinated, and whoever was behind it thought farmers were slow, rural, easy. They were wrong. I poured another cup of coffee, opened my laptop, and began rebuilding the chain of ownership from the ground up. If they wanted a war fought on paper, I was fluent. The first lie unraveled at 3:17 a.m. I found a zoning amendment filed 5 years ago, buried under a clerical correction, that quietly reclassified my land as future residential buffer. No notice, no hearing, just signatures, HOA signatures. I drove into town before sunrise, straight to the county records office. The clerk recognized me. Everyone did. You didn't hear this from me, she whispered, sliding over a manila folder. But you're not the first. Inside were parcels, small ones sold the same way. Elderly owners, inherited land, all adjacent to HOA developments, all transferred through emergency liens. Pattern established. I hired a title forensic analyst out of Dallas. Expensive, precise. She found forged notary stamps in a shell LLC that traced back through 2 law firms and a trust to the HOA's legal counsel. That was when the pressure started. My bank froze a credit line. The feed supplier lost my account. A code enforcement truck parked across from my gate. Cameras pointed inward. Someone wanted me tired, isolated. Instead, I got methodical. HOAs live and die by covenants, rules, paper, and paper cuts both ways. I discovered their master deed contained a poison pill, a reciprocal enforcement clause. Any entity abusing lien authority could be subjected to collective remedy by affected landowners. They weaponized it against individuals. They never imagined it pointed inward. I formed an LLC overnight and quietly purchased delinquent HOA liens, dozens of them, through public auctions they hadn't monitored in years. Late fees, unpaid fines, minor violations, all legal, all enforceable. By the time Linda Carver noticed, I controlled the debt on nearly every house in the association. She called me herself, voice shaking now. You don't understand what you're doing. I understand perfectly, I said. You sold land you didn't own. I'm just collecting what you owe. Silence. I wasn't angry anymore. Anger is sloppy. This was something colder. I scheduled the foreclosure notices to be delivered simultaneously. Quiet traps. No threats. Just timelines. And in the margins of every document, I left the same note. This could have been resolved. The emergency HOA meeting was called for 6 p.m., but the parking lot was full by 5:20. I watched from my truck as neighbors filed into community center. Couples gripping folders, retirees whispering, a few people already crying into their phones. Every single one of them had received the same envelope that morning. Certified, legal, final. Inside, the air smelled like panic and cheap coffee. Linda Carver stood at the front, trying to project control. Pearls again, same blazer. But her hands trembled as she shuffled papers that no longer meant anything. We are dealing with an external attack, she said into the microphone. A bad actor exploiting technicalities to intimidate homeowners. Murmurs rippled through the room. I stood up before she could continue. Funny, I said calmly. That's exactly how you described my land when you sold it. Heads turned. Eyes widened. Recognition spread like a spark catching dry grass. I walked down the aisle slowly. No rush. Fear does enough rushing on its own. Linda's voice sharpened. You're not authorized to speak. I am, I replied, setting my laptop on the podium. Because everything I'm about to show is public record. The projector flickered to life. The first slide, my original deed. Dated. Verified. Clean. The second, the HOA lien, filed without notice, signed by a notary who was dead 6 months before the date on the page. Gasps. A woman near the front covered her mouth. I clicked again. Email chains. Internal HOA discussions. Linda's name highlighted over and over. Phrases like no resistance expected and farm owner won't have resources. You use emergency lien authority to seize land you didn't own, I said. Then you sold it. That's not a mistake. That's fraud. Linda leaned into the mic, voice cracking. This man is trying to destroy your homes. No, I said, finally letting steel enter my voice. I gave you every chance to stop this. You ignored me, so I followed your rules. I pulled out a folder and held it up. I legally purchased the liens on 47 properties in this HOA. Late fees, unpaid fines, minor violations you enforced ruthlessly until someone enforced them back. The room erupted. People stood up shouting questions. Is this real? Are we losing our houses? Linda, what did you do? Linda's composure shattered. You can't do this, she hissed, stepping toward me. We'll sue you into the ground. Right then, the back doors opened. County auditors, state investigators, 2 uniformed officers. The timing wasn't dramatic by accident. A man in a gray suit spoke clearly. Linda Carver, you are under investigation for fraudulent land transfer, conspiracy, and abuse of lien authority. Linda bolted. She didn't make it 5 steps. As cuffs closed around her wrists, she screamed, not at them, but at me. You don't know who you mess with. I met her eyes. Neither did you. Outside, sirens and camera flashes painted the night. Inside, the truth finally had room to breathe. The foreclosure notices stopped moving forward at 9:12 a.m. on a Tuesday. I was repairing a fence when my phone buzzed. 3 emails, 1 text, all saying the same thing in different legal dialects. Stay granted. Titles frozen. HOA authority suspended. I leaned on the post, listening to the wire hum in the wind. For the first time in weeks, the land felt quiet again. By noon, the county issued a formal statement. The HOA was dissolved pending criminal investigation. An interim administrator would take over. All fines, liens, and emergency actions were voided until further review. Families kept their houses. Banks exhaled. The neighborhood that had once treated me like an inconvenience suddenly remembered my name. Apologies came in fragments. A man from Lot 12 showed up with a pie he clearly hadn't baked. A retired teacher left a handwritten note in my mailbox. We didn't know. I'm sorry. I believe some of them. Not all. Linda Carver took a plea deal before the week was out. So did the HOA's attorney. Fraud, conspiracy, abuse of authority. The words fell heavy on the evening news, but they never quite captured the damage they'd done or how close they'd come to getting away with it. The land sale was officially voided. The buyer disappeared behind lawyers and NDAs. My deed returned clean, stamped unquestionable. When I walked the property line again, nothing had changed, and everything had. Cattle grazed where survey stakes had once been. The farmhouse creaked the way it always had. Normal life resumed, but it was a different normal, sharper, more alert. Still, something bothered me. The Shell LLC that initiated the lien transfer dissolved the same day Linda was arrested. No fight, no panic, just gone. Its final transaction moved through 3 jurisdictions in under an hour and vanished offshore. Too clean, too professional. Linda hadn't been the architect. She'd been the manager. A week later, a plain white envelope arrived. No return address. No stamp I recognized. Inside was a single sheet of paper, a satellite map of my land. The eastern boundary, unchanged on the ground, was highlighted in red ink, not crossed, not erased, just traced. At the bottom, 3 words were typed, perfectly centered. Phase 1 complete. I folded the paper carefully and slid it into the desk drawer with the rest of the evidence I couldn't quite close. Outside, the sun dropped low over the fields, turning the grass gold. The kind of view HOAs love to protect, right up until it's worth stealing. I stepped onto the porch and looked east. Whatever had come from my land wasn't done with it yet, and next time they wouldn't underestimate me.